Hello everyone and welcome to the DevScope YouTube channel. Join me today as we learn more about calculation groups in Power BI. Calculation groups are a collection of items which represent basically the same measures that you normally would create in your report, but are created in a little bit of a different way. In a nutshell, if you have sales, quantity, revenue, or even costs, and you would normally create 4 to 5 measures to calculate month to date for each, for example, by using the calculation groups, you would only have to create one calculation item and apply that to all of them. Before we get to the hows and the ifs, let's understand a little bit more about this topic. Calculation groups are a feature in Power BI that allows you to create reusable groups of calculations, and this enables consistent and efficient application of measures across different dimensions in your data, without the need of repeating DAX code or even measures. Why should you choose calculation groups? In my opinion, you should always create this to save you time in the future. Imagine you have a report with multiple measures and you want to apply a similar logic to each of them across different metrics. And if we need to change the logic in the future, instead of going for every single one of the metrics, you would just have to change the logic in one calculation item. Without calculation groups, this would mean duplicating measures and managing a complex set of calculations. Now that we talked a little bit more about what calculation groups are, let's see how you can create them. Calculation groups, as you know, is a new feature in Power BI that was created in October of 2023. Previously, you could always create them in Tabular Editor, but now you can really create them inside the Power BI. The only thing you would need to do is come to your options menu, go to the preview features and turn on the calculation group, as you can see in the screen. Now that we've seen how we can activate this feature, let's see more about how you can create them. The only thing that we need to do is to come to the model pane view on the left side and go to this new one that Power BI implemented, the model on the data side. As you can see, we have the calculation group tab and we already have some created, but we can create new ones. So the only thing we need to do is to click on the calculation groups and a new pane will appear with the already ones that you have created, and then you can click on new calculation group or even right side here and new calculation group. We'll just create here one and it will lead you directly to a new calculation item. The calculation items are what basically you will put the measures inside. Let's create here a year-to-date metric. I already have it saved here, so we just need to copy paste it. And how calculation items work is that basically you would create the same way you would create a metric, but instead of using it multiple times, you just have to create it once. The only change you would need to actually do is in the calculate part of the metric, instead of inputting the actual measure you will normally create, we just need to input selected measure. We save it, and as you can see, the calculation item will be saved. The same logic that we have on the calculation group, we have here on the calculation items, in which we can see the properties and we can just add as many calculation items as we would like. I'll create a new one so that we can see how they can interact between them. I have an average week here and I can save it. And it automatically adds it to the right side of the calculation group too. We can also change the names. So for example, let's call it calculation group test. And this is a simple way that you can create the calculations groups. Now that we've seen how we can create the calculations group, let's see a little bit more of a real world example. So I already have here a cover and a demo page. And in the demo page, I have a sales quantity by year and by month. There are two possible ways that we can use the calculation groups. The first way is by filtering. And what we need to do is just normal filtering in the filter pane. So we just add the column from the newly created calculation group. And as you can see, it will show us both of the calculation items that we have created. So if I select year to date, as you can see, it will apply the metric of a year to date without the need of actually creating the metric. And then if I select average week instead of year to date, it will give me the average week for each of the values. If we input both at the same time, as you can see, none of them will be applied. Okay, so it basically is as you're not selecting anything. Okay, this is the first way of creating and using the calculation groups, and the second way is to actually create a measure. And I can show you really fast on how to do that. I already have it saved here. So we create a sales quantity year-to-date metric in which we do a simple calculate on top of the metric that we want to use. And then we say that we want to use the calculation group test, for example, and the calculation group column. And then we say that we want it to be equal to year to date, for example. So what this does is that even though we are creating a metric, it's not a complex metric. It's a simple calculate on top of a complex metric that's behind on the calculation item. In order to use it, we just need to add it to the visual. Now you ask me, what happens if I try to use a filter on top of this? If we try to use a filter on top of this, so what it will happen is that if I select the year to date again, the normal metric which is created just by the sales quantity, it will apply the year to date, and if I select the average week, it will select the average week. And as you can see, the year to date, when you're selecting the average week, will also change. What it will happen is that the actual sales quantity year to date metric is calculating the year to date, and then because we are filtering the calculation group, it is creating a new metric basically on top of the year to date. It's creating a new filter on top of a sales quantity year to date. Now that we've seen how to use the calculation groups, let's talk a little bit about the benefits. The fact that there's a big simplification on the maintenance of the metrics in the model, and that you have a consistency across all of your measures in your model, and even the scalability that it brings. But just by the fact that you have a much simpler way of having multiple calculations without having to create a ton of metrics. One thing that it will happen as soon as you create the calculation groups is that Power BI would instantly disable the implicit measures. What do I mean by implicit measures? If you are new to Power BI and you do not know this term is basically when you just drag a column. So instead of dragging an actual measure, if you drag a column and you click on the data options, you have the aggregations part. The aggregations cannot be applied to the data to this data field as soon as you create calculation groups. This, for people who are new to Power BI, may be a little bit of a disadvantage, but inside the Power BI community, it's already a feature that's frowned upon and it's considered a bad practice. So we always discourage the use of it. That is all for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for future videos as we explore Power BI together.